Okay, hello. Today is June 24th, 2021. My name is Leslie Torres, and I am interviewing Maryann Piñón for the University Library Special Collections and Archives at the University of Texas Rio Grande Valley, hereafter abbreviated as UTRGV. This project is in partnership with the Voces Oral History Center at the University of Texas at Austin. Please know, Ms. Piñón, that this interview will be placed in the University Library Special Collections and Archives at UTRGV and shared with the Voces Oral History Center at the University of Texas at Austin. If there is anything that you do not wish to answer or talk about, I will honor your wishes. Also, if there is something you want to talk about, please bring it up and we'll talk about it. The University Library Special Collections and Archives will archive your interview along with any other photographs and other documentation you're willing to share. UTRGV University Library will retain copyright or non-exclusive right to the interview and any other materials you donate to Special Collections and Archives at UTRGV. Because we are not conducting this interview in person, I need to record you consenting to make sure you agree with our interview procedures before I continue. So I'll ask you a series of 6 questions. Please say yes, I agree, or no, I do not agree after each question. Do you give University Library Special Collections and Archives at UTRGV consent to archive your interview and your materials at the UTRGV University Library?
Yes, I agree.
Do you grant UTRGV University Library Special Collections and Archives right, title, and interest and copyright over the interview and any materials you provide?
Yes, I agree.
Do you agree to allow UTRGV University Library Special Collections and Archives to post this interview on the internet where it may be viewed by people around the world?
I agree. Yes, I agree.
And do you grant the University Library Special Collections and Archives consent to share your Zoom interview with the Voces Oral History Center at the University of Texas at Austin for inclusion in the Voices of a Pandemic Oral History mini project, which will include posting the interview on the internet?
Yes, I agree.
And as you recall, we previously filled out a pre-interview form. We use information from the pre-interview form to help in research. The entire form is kept in a secure Voces server at the University of Texas at Austin. Before Voces sends it to UTRGV University Library Special Collections and Archives, we would have stripped out any contact information for yourself or family members, so that will not be part of your public file. Your public file will only be accessible at UTRGV University Library. The final 2 questions ask for your consent on what I just described. So, do you wish for us to share the rest of your interview in your public file available to researchers at UTRGV University Library Special Collections and Archives?
Yes, I agree.
And last question. On occasion, UTRGV Special Collections and Archives and Voces receive requests from journalists who wish to contact our interview subjects. We only deal with legitimate news outlets. Do you give consent for us to share your phone numbers or your email with journalists?
Yes, I agree.
Okay. Thank you for your consent. Your experiences and stories mean a lot to us at UTRGV Special Collections and Archives. So, Maryann, thank you for your time. Like I said earlier, your stories and experiences are valuable to us at UTRGV Special Collections and Archives and the Voces Project. Particularly for us at UTRGV Special Collections, we are committed to preserving the stories of Mexican Americans and Latinos from South Texas and the Rio Grande Valley, and those who work closely with these populations during the COVID-19 pandemic. So because you are the owner of Grind Coffee Company in Edinburg, Texas, and because you are a daughter and a sister who is knowledgeable of the ways COVID-19 has affected others in her inner circle, I know you have many meaningful stories and experiences to share on how COVID-19 has impacted these roles you carry out in your life. So before I ask you to share stories about your life in this pandemic, tell us, who is Maryann Piñón?
It's me. I am, I guess, like in a very fun and lighthearted way. I'm a coffee lover who became an entrepreneur and opened her own coffee shop. And I love music and I love the beach. And yeah, I mean, that's, I'm an avid concert goer. Obviously that has been put on hold. But yeah, that's who I am in a small nutshell.
Okay, thank you for sharing. So the first question I want to ask you is, when did you first hear about COVID-19 and how did you learn about it? Through radio, TV, social media, etc.?
So it was actually through social media. It was New Year's Eve, actually. I was in bed. I had just finished hanging out with my friends at my house, and I was on Twitter, and I started reading up on a virus that was spreading like wildfire fire in China. And I remember very clearly thinking, wow, that could never get to us. And obviously it was definitely, it did get here. But I just think it was really interesting that I thought there's no way that could end up in the valley or in my home, so yeah, through social media.
Okay. And as you learned more about the information about COVID-19, what was your reaction to it?
My first reaction was to kind of put it in the back burner and not really think about it. It wasn't until we heard of the confirmed cases in, I believe, Seattle, Washington. I know it was out in the West Coast where they had the first confirmed cases. So it was in the back burner, and then once I found out it got here to the United States, I was constantly, refreshing Twitter. It's very odd, but I get a lot of my news from Twitter, and then I'll like go into different variables, whether it be news sources, articles. But yeah, I would occasionally keep up with it, and once it made its way to the mainland, I was watching the news like a hawk.
Okay. And when you heard about the cases in Seattle, is that when you realized this pandemic was a serious life-altering event, or was it something else that stood out for you?
I realized relatively quickly that it was severe just because of the way China wasn't able to handle it, and the way they were handling it was by making, makeshift hospitals to keep, people in a hospital. So I knew early on that it was serious. And then when it got to the United States, it was just kind of like, uh-oh, I'm panicking.
Okay.
So yeah.
So you mentioned Twitter, but over the last few months, what news media, social media, or other sources do you rely on to keep you informed about coronavirus?
I still rely on Twitter heavily. I feel like there's a lot of people tend to vent through Twitter, so I feel like any sort of immediate news, or even if it's just 140 characters, it keeps me curious enough to be like, okay, let me check CNN, let me check. I typically do rely on CNN the most at home. I also do MSNBC, and of course ABC News. Those are kind of my news outlets that I go towards. Yeah.
Okay. And can you share with me what you understand about COVID-19 as an infectious disease and any of its variants? And likewise, can you share with me what you don't understand about this coronavirus?
So, I mean, I know it's a respiratory infection, like it's a respiratory disease. And I understand that it essentially is to a certain degree airborne, and you're really at the beginning we thought it was by touching doorknobs, touching like dirty surfaces that we were able to contract it. But after a while we realized, okay, no, it's airborne, and it's just like coughing, sneezing, through the droplets of just like everyday breathing. For us, that's how it was being transmitted. Sorry if you see my employees just walking around in the background. I knew I wouldn't be able to do this interview at home. So yeah, I know it's a respiratory infectious disease, and essentially the severity of cases is dependent on how strong your immune system is. So some people, technically, as horrible as it sounds, your body is killing itself trying to protect itself. I think that's really intense. As for like not understanding the disease, there's obviously like the main thing, and the main thing that I don't understand, I would like to know, and in the future I know we will have more information. It's how it transferred to human beings. whether it be through, you have like all these variables that we just don't know at this moment. And if maybe it was just some sort of variant in itself. As for the variants, I understand that in specific regions, they tend to pop up whenever there's a mass outbreak. And when the outbreak occurs, there's a variant that's kind of stemmed off of that. And then it'll go into different regions, being the, Delta variant. I think there's a Delta variant right now from India, which is to be of concern. So yeah, I understand that they're coming from different regions and they just have, I guess they're stronger to a certain degree. So yeah.
Okay, and can you tell me what you know about the various vaccines available to the public, and how do you feel about these vaccines?
So I know there's, of course, like the top three in the United States, which is the Pfizer, Moderna, and the Johnson and Johnson. And then, of course, I know there's a couple of vaccines that have been developed in England, and there's some other countries as well that have been developed. I know. I mean, the reality is like the opinion that I have on the vaccines is like yes, there's some that don't have as quite, and also by some I mean Johnson and Johnson. The efficacy isn't as high as, for example, Pfizer, Moderna. I don't think that's an issue in the state that we're in. I think being vaccinated is just the best thing to do in our situation, especially because there's really no control over how we can stop the pandemic if the vaccine isn't actually flowing in society.
Okay, and do you have a vaccination story that you would like to share with me now or perhaps later in this interview?
Yeah, sure, I guess. I mean, yeah. Right now? Okay, yeah, let's do that right now. Yeah, so we when the vaccinations started, they were done in phases, right? So phase 1, 2, and 3. I think it's 3 phases. Once we got to a point where almost all my staff was able to get vaccinated, I was straight up on the internet trying to lock in a time frame for them so they could go get vaccinated. Of course, we had the discussion like, yeah, we want to get vaccinated. So we were really helping each other out in our group chat. And one of my employees, he actually was like, hey, there's a couple spots open, CVS, and we were able to lock in some spots for our families. And then we started trying to lock in spots for ourselves. So very early on, we wanted we all knew we wanted to get vaccinated, and we were helping each other to try and get vaccinated, just to ensure like a level of safety here in the shop. So yeah, that was pretty much it. I think we've traveled a ways away so we could get vaccinated as well. It wasn't as available. I had to go to Elsa. So.
Okay, it's really cool. And do your family members hold the same beliefs as you about COVID-19, or are there some who take it more seriously or more lightly?
Yeah, so my family, we're kind of on the same page with it. I do think our level of precautions are very different, but we do believe that it is a big threat.
Okay, and for these next set of questions, I'd like to talk about how you've seen COVID-19 affect family members and friends. So firstly, can you share with me in general, how many members are in your family and who are they to you?
That were contracted with COVID-19 or just in general?
You could say both, I guess.
Okay, yeah. So I have my mom and my dad. I have a sister, her name is Melissa, and she is 50. Yes, and then I have an older brother, Miguel. Miguel the third. He is 49, and then I have another brother. His name is Mark, and I'm not too sure on his age. I think he's like 42 or something like that. Yeah, I think, yeah. And then there's myself. I'm Maryann, I'm 30. And then I have some nieces. I have 3 nieces and 1 nephew. Um, my nieces are in their 20s and my nephew is 8. And then out of all of us, my niece was actually one of the first to get COVID in the Valley. She was actually working in the hospital, and very lucky she didn't have gastrointestinal symptoms that she had, and she was very, very tired. And then that was in March, yeah, March/April, and then we, and then myself and my parents, we all contracted COVID in the last 2 weeks of December.
Okay. And what was your immediate family's reaction to COVID?
You know, we had the panic. I think we all had the panic, and we were trying to figure out what to do. And then you had my dad, for example, like he said, well, the only way that this is gonna end is if we all get it. And I'd be like, no, but you have to be cautious. And he was like, no, well, like, I'm obviously cautious, but he's like, the only way for us to the world to overcome it is that a lot of us have to get it. So there was that level of like, I was constantly washing my hands, to the point where like my hands are now super rough because of all the hand washing that I did. And then there was, like my dad who would like touch a whole bunch of doorknobs and then just like remove his mask and like not wash his hands. So it was really interesting seeing the two dynamics. And there was a lot of like, what is right, what is wrong being talked about during the lockdown.
Okay. And did your family follow the stay-at-home period of last March and April of 2020?
Yes.
Okay. And did you continue to quarantine afterwards? Why or why not?
Yes. So for myself personally, I didn't know if I would be able to survive COVID, but I knew I had a better chance than my parents. So because of that, I lived with them. I was very cautious in who I was spending time with, and for the most part, I stayed home up until maybe about October, when I started going out and being outside. So it was really interesting, like spending so much time indoors on your own in your own little bubble, and then slowly putting more interactions into your life. But I'm an act like I'm a homebody, so it wasn't too much of a difference for me. I would only go out like once a week before that. So yeah, so it wasn't anything different.
Okay. And did your family change the way you socialized when you went out in public? And if so, how?
Yes. So for sure, we didn't socialize. We kind of stayed at home. We started using a lot of FaceTime. Uh, and if we would go to someone's house, and really by going to someone's house, it would be our immediate family. It wouldn't be anyone outside of our little group. We would, you know, go hang out either outside or inside. And if we were inside, we'd wear masks. And even to this day, sometimes we still hang out outside with masks. So we still, we take those precautions, and it was really just to take care of ourselves, right? Because the reality is like, we didn't know if it was going to kill us or not.
Okay. And in our pre-interview, you mentioned that you contracted COVID-19, and you mentioned it today as well. So can you describe what precautions you took to not spread it in your shop, and describe what symptoms you had?
Yeah. So I remember finding out, it was a Saturday evening, that my dad had been in close contact with someone who tested positive for COVID. So at that point, I pretty much quarantined myself. I quarantined him, and then I quarantined myself and my mom away from him. And we were wearing masks inside the house just to make sure that we wouldn't get sick. Um, and I removed myself from the schedule. I let everyone know, hey, I'm not going to be going in until I get a negative test result back. Because the last thing I wanted was for it to transmit to their families and have them going through the same thing. So I removed myself from the schedule. My staff was able to go ahead and I removed myself from the schedule. I cut down the hours so I could have enough staff to be able to handle the shop for the 2 weeks that I was going to be out. And I had to train one of my baristas to how to roast, and I had to train her through FaceTime. So yeah, I really just tried to take as much precaution as I could. When I yeah, I'm trying to think back. Yeah, that was definitely, those were the steps that I took for the shop. As for myself at home, once I contracted COVID, it started off with simple chills and a small little scratch in my throat. And I thought, yeah, this isn't allergies. At that point, I knew, right? And my dad had the same. Really, after 2 or 3 days, where the symptoms changed for us. So for myself, I developed extreme fatigue. I could not stay awake, and I had fevers on and off throughout the day. And then I had the gastrointestinal issues as well. I suffered from, like, I guess, diarrhea and vomiting. And then it took a turn into shortness of breath. And we had a pulse oximeter at that time, and I was constantly checking my saturation levels. And when I was walking, I was okay. I'd sit down and it would drop down it would drop down to the 90s. And then it got to the point where I couldn't sleep at night, or I would go to bed. I was able to sleep, but as soon as I'd get out of, or try to get up from bed, or if I moved too much, I would lose my breath and I'd go into a coughing fit for about 5 minutes. So every morning that I wake up, my mom had no symptoms, lucky her. She had no symptoms, so every time I'd wake up, I'd call out for her, and I would actually have her, like, I'd get up from the bed and I'd just sit down, and I'd have her just hitting my back, so I could just catch my breath a little bit faster. And then I'd walk maybe about 20 feet to the restroom, and then I'd have another cough attack. And I was able to go to the doctor, and I actually went to the doctor 3 different times, just to make sure that I didn't have any fluid or was developing pneumonia. And I think my pulse, my saturation level in my blood dropped down to about 85%, 85 to 84%. And I remember that night that I saw that, I was like, okay, if I get to 80, I'm going to the hospital. And I was very fortunate after that it started, I started getting better. And yeah, that was my experience.
Okay, and can you describe what it was like quarantining in your own home, like from yourself and your dad, keeping everyone separate?
It was hard because we just wanted to be together, and we didn't know what was happening. I wanted to be constantly checking on my dad because he's very stubborn, and I was like, you need to check your pulse, you need to put this on your finger, and we need to check. And I'm like, no, you need to do that. And so yeah, like it was really hard because you wanted to care for, you wanted to be, I wanted to be nurturing my dad and, you know, nurturing my mom, and we were just all separated. It was very nerve-wracking, and it was a very intense time. We were all on antidepressant. So we were all taking Xanax as well because it was really stressful. It was just like you're with the people that you care for the most, and you're trying to take care of each other, and you can't even be with each other. So it was pretty rough. Um, but it was interesting, you know. Once we found out that my dad was really sick, we actually put up like a vinyl tarp in one of the entrances. We kind of left him out to the side, and then right after that, my mom tested positive, and she went to go stay with him. And I was kind of holding down the fort. You know, I was making them lunch, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and I was giving it to them through a little window that we had, and then I started getting sick. So we were all sick. It was really chaotic. Yeah, but you know, I'm here, so that's okay. That's good.
Okay. And can you explain what it was like getting COVID tested at this time of the pandemic when you all got sick?
It was frustrating because I would say that we got sick during the second wave, right at the beginning of the second wave. So I got tested maybe about 4 or 5 times. I remember the day that I actually got tested. I tested negative. I already had chills and I had a sore throat, and I knew the test was wrong. So yeah, like I mean, we were pretty much in lines, you know, waiting to get tested. It would take about an hour to 2 hours. Um, you know, and you're just kind of like in your car just waiting. So it was somewhat stressful, um, but it wasn't as bad as when we first found out about the pandemic and the lines were like forming at 5 a.m. and ending like at 5 p.m. Um, so yeah, it was kind of like right in the middle, I guess. And getting poked in the nose is not fun.
Okay. And do you remember what month this was?
This is in December.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. And do you have any long-lasting symptoms? And if so, how do you manage them, if at all?
You know, the one thing that I do have is I still get shortness of breath. Um, that one's kind of hard to manage. I still do get tired. I get winded really easily. I was actually pretty active beforehand. So now it's really difficult because there's simple tasks that I do that just really, they'll literally make me stop for about 5 minutes to just kind of catch my breath. I always joke around with people and I say that I have COVID lungs, and I don't know how well they can handle excessive amount of walking and whatnot. Um, so yeah, I just stop and take a quick break. That's really all you can do. Um, and then of course with exercise, you can probably develop that a little bit better. But I've met a lot of people who still have that shortness of breath that stays with them for a while. And then I completely forgot about this. I also lost like 50% of my hair. So that happened months after I was diagnosed. It was actually around the time I got my first vaccine. Um, and it was just like, you know, I would wake up in the morning, my hair was matted, and I would just be pulling out hair. And it was kind of almost pushed me towards a little depression because I was just like, who am I without my hair? Um, but of course, I was like, yeah, nah, this is like, get over it. Not get over it, but I got over it relatively fast.
Okay. And as you mentioned, your father was infected by the virus. So can you describe to me what his recovery process has looked like and how your family has coped with his health issues?
Yeah. So my dad was admitted to the hospital December 23rd. And um, yeah, he was admitted in December 23rd. And we weren't able to see him, so obviously that was really hard, and we were pretty much stuck outside of the hospital. Um, and there was a very like kind of like a we I remember the first day he was there, we were parked outside of the hospital for like 3-4 hours, and that was really hard. He had his phone at the time, and he was still able to talk to us, and so we were calling him constantly to check on him, telling him to charge his phone, but at that point he was having trouble standing up, and he wasn't able to walk because he was so out of breath. He had developed a bilateral pneumonia, and within a couple of days he was moved into the ICU, and then one of his lungs collapsed. And actually he recently told us that when he was there and his lung had collapsed, the doctors went up to him and they said, "We need to put you on a ventilator. If we don't, you're going to die." And my dad pretty much gave them the consent, like, "Yeah, do it. Do whatever you need to do." So he was on a ventilator for 2 months. Yeah, a little bit over 2 months, but roughly around 2 months. And anyone being on a ventilator over 3 weeks poses a really high risk. So we had a lot of moments where we thought it was the end of the road for him. There was many times where they were like, "I don't think he's gonna make it." The doctors told us there was a 2% chance of him being able to come out of this, being able to walk, being able to talk, not having severe brain damage. And it really was the way that we got through it was meeting with each other every Sunday to pray for him outside of the hospital. And it was praying every day, praying every second, for whether it was moments of gratitude of, thank God, we have food, we have a roof over our heads. It was something as simple as that, or having an emotional breakdown, through prayer and with God. That was really the only way that we made it through, and we still continue to do that. So they eventually transferred him to a long-term care facility, and then they transferred him to a nursing home. Right now, my dad has been he woke up in February from his coma. He was sedated, and they didn't know like how the sedation medication was going to affect him. So yeah, he woke up from his coma right after our Texas freeze, and he's been awake since. At that moment, he was on the ventilator. It took them a couple of months to wean him off, and right now he is off the ventilator. He doesn't have a trach collar, and he's eating on his own. He's talking. He still has limited mobility, and he has a big wound that developed as it was a bed sore that just it grew. It's a stage 4 bed sore. To stand for a little bit. I think they stood him up yesterday or 2 days ago for 8 minutes. So he has a really long recovery, like road to recovery. But he's here and he got through it, and he's still as sharp as I don't know how sharp he could be, but he's still sharp. And he still remembers a lot of things. So we're blessed in that he's still able to be my dad. He didn't really, that time, like, it wasn't really lost. Yeah, he doesn't know what happened in those 2 months, but he's here with us. That's a blessing in itself.
I'm glad to hear he's doing better. So how did the pandemic impact family traditions, customs, and holiday celebrations? For example, did you... Oh, go ahead.
No, yeah, continue.
For example, did you celebrate birthdays and Christmas differently, or did you have a traditional Thanksgiving, or did you celebrate in different ways during this pandemic?
Yeah, we celebrated differently. You know, I remember for birthdays, we just kind of did a drive-by and gave a gift. Not like a fancy drive-by, right, where it was like with the balloons, and it was just like, hey, we brought you something. We would stand outside for a little bit and then we go home. Um, for Thanksgiving, we made Thanksgiving dinner at the house, and everyone came to pick up a plate. That's how we kind of we wanted to keep the tradition going. We just didn't want to harm anyone in the process, right? Um, and then in for Christmas, we weren't able to celebrate Christmas because my dad wasn't at home. My family went and they dropped off gifts on the 24th. I remember I was like out of it. I couldn't. I was sick, and my mom was receiving the gifts, and I don't think we opened them until like honestly February, just because like the recovery process was really rough on us, and just like everything was accumulating, and we had to process everything. Um, and then now, like we're vaccinated, and we still take those precautions. We still do try to stay outside as much as we can, and I don't think we're ready to be on like I don't think we're ready to just go back to normal quite yet.
And if you attended any weddings, graduations, or funerals, can you please share with me how the pandemic made these events different from pre-pandemic times?
Yeah, so I attended two funerals. It was my uncle and actually three funerals. They were different in that, like, one of the first ones, we could be like up close with, like, we were able to go to the body. But when it came time for burial, they didn't let us stay for them to drop down the casket. I thought that was really interesting. Not entirely sure why, but yeah, that's we couldn't stay to watch the casket be drawn down. As for like in the actual funeral home, it was like they had pretty much families clustered in their individual sections, and then they had like 2 rows of space to allow like that 6 feet of distancing. And of course, everything was minimum. It was usually you go to funerals, and there's there could easily be like 200 people in the funeral home. And that wasn't the case. These were like 30 people at a funeral type of deal. So it was interesting. It was hard because when you go to a funeral, you go to a viewing or a wake, you want to comfort the family, and you physically can't comfort them. So that was really weird. I just remember doing like this, like I'm sorry, when really you just want to hug them and be like, hey, like you couldn't get like you couldn't like hug them, and they couldn't cry on your shoulder, like, because that was a way to get infected. Like it was very detached, and for good reason, but it was really hard. And there's moments where I took the risk, and um I would hug people, and it was mainly because I was like, you know what, like, if I get sick, this is worth it. It was one of those moments where uh, obviously you want to comfort your friend. So yeah, that it was just a weird experience, especially because those deaths were all due to COVID. So there was just a really heavy weight in the room, knowing that we were taking the risk being there, but we wanted to be there.
Okay, and in our pre-interview, you also told me that your church-going activity shifted a bit due to the pandemic. So can you describe what precautions your local church took to protect its visitors, if at all, and have you gone back yet?
I wouldn't. So yeah, so I was serving in the church at the time, and I was a greeter. So it'd essentially be like, hey, thanks for coming. My role was non-existent when the pandemic hit. Um, and you know, they switched over to online church, so they're doing online services, and that's how they were able to stay in touch with the community is through those services. I think around October of 2020, they started in church meetings, right? And they had a limited capacity at that time. Um, One of the things that really just kind of made me stand back and just keep to the online church uh, that I'm going to now is um, everyone had a very different view, and it sounds horrible to say, but there's mask wearing in I think has become so political. So even if it is actually helpful, if the church was predominantly conservative, it put us in a position where someone who has been affected by it, has had death, has seen death due to COVID. It really dampened the mood of wanting to return. So even at this moment, vaccinations are again in a political point. It's just kind of like I'd rather stick it out a little longer and not go into a church just quite yet until there's actual evidence that can convince um, people that the vaccine is worth it. For me, it was a no-brainer. I had COVID. Never again do I want to go through that. So they told us hey, you have to wait 90 days. That's literally on the 90th day. I was like, I'm going to get my vaccine. Um, so yeah, due to the political views that the church leaders have, I have not returned back because it puts us at risk.
Okay, and so this next set of questions focuses on your stories and experiences of the small business owner of Grind Coffee Company in the time of COVID-19. So firstly, when did Grind Coffee first open its doors to the public?
We opened March 26th, 2016.
Okay, and when did you decide to implement changes and precautions in the shop in response to the growing severity of COVID-19 in the United States?
It was the week that everything started shutting down. It was March 13th, March 14th. Um, we had just had an event the weekend before, and a lot of the staff was working that day, and just due to having people from out of town be in the facility and be in at that point for that specific event, it was it was super packed in here. So I took that course of action to just, okay, we have to 2 weeks, everyone has to quarantine. We need to make sure that we're not sick, and then go from there. And then after those 2 weeks, they had done the shutdown. So we shut down, and we were considered essential, and we just didn't feel it was right to keep this place open for dine-in or for so we started doing deliveries. We would pack up our coffee, and we would deliver to whoever would be placing orders, and that's how we ran for a couple of months.
Okay, so besides implementing deliveries, what kind of precautions did you enforce in your shop to protect yourself, your customers, and your baristas?
So the first couple of months up until August, our baristas were actually working one barista per shift, and that was really to implement a low contact between baristas, which would allow us, in the case of one barista finding out they were in close contact with someone who had COVID, the other staff would be safe. right? So then, of course, we had extreme cleaning. You know, every time someone would walk in through the door to order coffee, it was only for takeout or curbside. I mean, takeout or curbside. We would wipe down like the doorknobs. We would wipe down like it was really intense. It was a constant. It was constantly cleaning, and then we implemented the curbside, which also allowed us to keep less people in the shop, but still have still cater to the community. Um, and then once we were opening back up our establishment, it was around August, the end of August, I believe. Capacity rates for businesses and restaurants had gone up to about 75%, and we remained uh, at 25% up until the vaccination started rolling out, and then we slowly started adding more seating. Um, we had sneeze guards up. We had spaced out all the tables like 6 feet apart. We had marked um, so yeah, we really tried to make sure that we kept the community safe. And really, the only reason we opened in August was due to students going back to school and just the region not having you know accessible Wi-Fi. And everyone was doing online school at the time, so it was really to help the community. Because had that not been an issue, I think we would have been to go carry out up until the vaccinations started rolling out.
Okay. And can you describe the financial impact yourself and your business tackled due to the pandemic?
Yeah, we had to let go of 2 employees, um, and it was actually by their own will. They decided to try to find another jobs elsewhere, just because we did have to cut down hours drastically. Um, Truthfully, I took a hit. I didn't pay myself for about a year. As a startup, obviously that's kind of normal. But I wanted this establishment to stay open, and so I put that before myself. If I needed a little bit of money to pay off, pay my car, whatever, like, yeah, definitely I would. It was really just bare bones, um, just to get by. We were fortunate to receive a grant from the SBA as well as the city of Edinburg. So that allowed us to uh, purchase inventory and to help keep our staff. It helped us keep our staff paid. Kept them getting paid, so they wouldn't lose housing and whatnot. So yeah, and then in 2021 we received PPP loans as well as the Restaurant Revitalization Fund, which has helped tremendously. Um, and we're using we're trying to use that to reinvest into the community, to create more jobs, and to just help people reintroduce themselves into not being stuck at home, right? So yeah.
Okay. And so I understand that you and your team of baristas initiated a coffee drive for first responders last year. So can you explain to me when this took place and how it worked?
Yeah, so it's pretty much it was donation based. So if anyone in the community wanted to buy for person or specific hospital, they could purchase the gallons of coffee at a discounted rate, and we would pretty much match what they would pay, and we would go and drop off to hospitals throughout the McAllen Mission and Edinburg area. And that was really just us trying to give back to these people who are just working so hard. They were overworked. But it was also to keep that spirit of like, we're gonna get through this together. It it was trying to do good for the community. So yeah, that was really interesting because no one wanted to go drop off the coffee because it was near a hospital. Um, that was really fun. Um, Also terrifying.
Okay. And speaking on that, what was it like distributing these donations to an extremely high risk location? So like, were you allowed to drop
Ah,
them off
yeah.
outside?
So every hospital, what they had in the region was just a one little like container, pretty much, where they would ask you what you're doing here, who are you visiting, and they would check your temperature, and then if you were dropping something off, they'd be like, okay, go put it on that table and we'll pick it up. So the hospitals themselves were taking extreme precautions, which was great. But going to these places, I remember this. I went to a hospital in Edinburg, and I had parked, and I was dropping off a couple gallons of coffee, and I parked, and right next to me there was a lady who was in her car, and she's sobbing. Um, so that was really hard to be able to see that, to know like these people, like, and this was before I had contracted COVID, and I was like, um, just like these people are here, they want, like, they want to be with their loved ones, and they just physically cannot. And um it was interesting, it was really interesting to see those, like, to see that at the hospital, but then to also see like the hospital was celebrating all the people that they were sending home. And it was, I mean, you could see that it was emotionally draining, um at the hospitals. um so yeah, it was really interesting. I masked up, I double masked, I put gloves on, I double gloved, hand sanitizer all over my arms. I'd get home and I'd take off, my clothes and go shower, like just that paranoid of not wanting to bring COVID into the business and into my home.
Okay. And in our pre-interview, we discussed the expansion of your online website in response to the pandemic. So can you elaborate on this process and the different and new types of products you sold to adapt to the pandemic's restrictions?
Yeah, so what's really neat is we were already offering certain items online, and we had a small website. And during the pandemic, we just kind of had to full force onto the website and create like a curbside menu that you can order from online. So you can just, order online before you get here, pick it up. So yeah, it was really interesting having to do those things. And creating just like the content to do all that stuff, it takes a lot out of you. um but of course, not having people in the building allowed us to really focus on that. And we had to create new ways of distributing coffee. We started selling like little 8 ounce, like self, like one, like a little, 8 ounce of cold brew or a latte. uh and then of course we had like our 32-ounce option. Yeah. And then 64-ounce, excuse me, 64-ounce growler option that we would like make different lattes variations, so you could take home for like a week. And then of course the coffee bags, which is just selling the coffee beans so people could brew at home. And I think the community really stepped up in that situation, and they were just all about coming in and seeing how they could help to keep this place open, which is something that you don't really expect. Not that you don't expect, but it's just something that, you're like, I don't know how we're going to do this, how we're going to make it. And then the community shows up for you, and you're just like, wow, like, we're that, like, this establishment is that important to you. That's phenomenal. It was a really weird time because you're realizing how important this place is to so many people, but you're also realizing that like it's making a great impact in the community. And like, people will show up if you truly show interest and care towards their endeavors in their life. um so yeah, those little options, people, like, people kept on picking them up. Some people would come in like twice a week to get those full, like, 64-ounce growlers. So yeah, it was, I don't know, it was really interesting.
Okay. And so last year in 2020, the city of Edinburg introduced the stimulus program aimed at recovery from COVID, or shortened as Spark, which provided Edinburg residents with a gift card to various local businesses. So I understand that Grind Coffee Company was on this list of local businesses that residents could buy from with money provided by the city. So what was this process like for you? Did you have to apply to be considered a Spark business, or did the city reach out to you?
Yes, so you would get onto the website and to the City of Edinburg website, and you apply to be a part of the Spark program. Um, and then for the most part, you would instantly get approved to do so. They were focusing specifically on small businesses instead of like big corporations, which I thought was fantastic. Um, the small business is really the one who gets hit. The corporations, they tend to have a little bit of wiggle room to kind of hold the fort down until something, you know, there's resolution. Um, so yeah, we joined the Spark program. By being a part of the Spark program, we received that $2,000 grant, which was used for utilities and for employees, as well as purchasing products. And then uh, alongside with the Spark program, they released the Spark program for residents. So residents of Edinburg could apply to get $100 gift card, and that gift card could be used at any of the locations, any of the businesses that were accepting that gift card in the city. So it was really cool because there's a lot of people who were like, man, I'm gonna spend all of this here, and they were getting just like their coffee free for like 2-3 weeks. Um, and then of course the last day that it was being able to use, it was chaotic in here. There's people just lining up outside, and we were just like, it was really hectic. I remember I had a friend who had her pizza, and she was calling all these restaurants to see if she could order pizza, and establishment, they're like, yeah, we're not answering the phones. It's insane. So a lot of people didn't get to use their gift cards right away, but yeah, it was I think it was a really great incentive just to go out, find new places, and that was another thing. It brought the community in, different people from the area to come in and be like, I had no idea this place existed. So it was definitely one of the cooler things that happened uh, throughout the pandemic.
Okay, and additionally, did Spark or the Spark gift cards have a big impact on sales and financial security for yourself and your business?
Yeah, it did help out. You just have people who were like willing to just buy whatever you had available. Um, who, they were like, you know what, we're gonna give this money to you. Like, we're gonna spend the $100 here. Um, so I thought that was really neat. Um, Again, it just proves that like the community is willing to take care of others in the community, and that's the bigger lesson that we learned from all of this. So yeah, it really helped out financially to keep us going. Yeah.
Okay. And well, earlier you mentioned about PPP loans and other types of financial assistance. Right now, we just talked about Spark. But did you feel that either your local, state, or federal government assisted you the best they could, or do you think there could have been more effort or anything like that?
I definitely think that there could have been more to help us. I think one of the bigger issues that many businesses owners face was tax. Like, we aren't just paying one specific tax. We're paying payroll taxes, we're paying inventory tax, and we're paying sales tax. All of that takes up a huge chunk of any sort of revenue that you make in a business. And I 100% understand that us being taxed is a part of keeping the local economy moving, and I get that 100%. But there should have been more implement like a better implementation of giving tax relief to small businesses. While the PPP loans and the grants that we were able to get were extremely helpful, no one can predict how much in taxes like you're gonna make until it's already been done. And there was never any leeway. It was like you had to be on time, if not, you were penalized for that. And in a situation where, I mean, sometimes you would have to dive into certain funds, funds that you just have saved in general, it was really hard to navigate through all of that. So I do think like there should have been more help when it came to taxes.
Okay. And in our pre-interview, we discussed that your business recently hit its 5-year anniversary, and to celebrate, you hosted a pop-up event at the shop. So
Yeah.
can you describe what precautions you took to make this event happen and to keep your customers, employees, and yourself safe?
Yeah, that was really interesting because at that point there was already people being vaccinated, and we decided the best way to like go forward was to have an event, but to have it outside, and at that point throughout the state of Texas, and we asked our guests, please wear a mask. That's, even if you're outside, please wear a mask. We're very fortunate that we're in an area where everyone seems to understand the severity of COVID-19. So we really didn't have any pushback from the community, like, oh, but we're outside. Everyone was very responsible, and they were, masking up when they were around people that weren't from their family. And yeah, we put tables outside, we separated them, in large gaps, we removed chairs from certain tables so they wouldn't get crowded. And we made it a very we made it an outdoor event to just keep the traffic inside at a minimum.
Okay, and now that the government and CDC have relaxed mask and social distancing mandates, are you still implementing these practices in your shop, and why or why not?
So yes, we are. The one thing we ask is that, our customers, when speaking to baristas, that they wear their mask. There's some customers who, they won't do so, and, they say they're vaccinated. And at that point, it's one of those, we're in a very difficult spot because of the relaxation of the mask mandate. So for the actual shop and for my employees, I do require that they wear their mask when they're working, and that's really just to make sure that they stay safe. And then, for our patrons, we ask, we cannot force them, but we do ask that they wear their mask when ordering, and that they can remove as soon as they sit down. We still haven't said like, hey, there's no mask in the, like you don't have to wear a mask. I actually went to a place recently. One of my favorite. I've been going there since I was young, and they had a sign on the door, and it said, "Notice: masks are not required." And I thought that was really extra. like they weren't really following protocol when the mask mandates were going on, and they felt the need to put a sign saying masks are not required. It made me really question why I was still going there, because there's just like a general, like, you have to kind of care for your neighbor. And I just felt like that was just like, we don't care. We just want everyone to know that you don't have to wear a mask here. So yeah, so that was, I think that was probably the last time that I went over there, because I was just like, that's, you didn't really say anything during the pandemic, and then you're saying. So yeah, I just went off on a tangent there. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. So the last time we spoke, you told me that you would be attending a coffee conference a few days before this scheduled interview. So what was it like attending a business conference during the pandemic? Were you hesitant to attend or eager to learn some new things for your business?
I was terrified. So I felt like, okay, everyone's going to be wearing their mask. I had not left the valley in about 2 years. Um, so when I got there, I noticed that, outdoors, pretty much everywhere, there was not many people wearing masks. And then when we actually got into the convention, I think I went with an employee, and we were the only ones wearing masks. It was shocking. It just shocked us. Yes, the vaccination rate is going up, and for the most part, anyone in the service industry, I do believe that they take care of themselves, and they probably were the first ones to get vaccinated, seeing as how we never really stopped working. um, but it was still really difficult. And I did as much as we did, as much as we could. So we would I remember for lunch we like went to go pick up food, and we sat outside instead of staying inside. And then we kind of like would find a little corner where there was not a lot of people, so we could remove our masks for a little bit. So it was really stressful, but the conference was also really fun. And yeah, it was also like during the seminars we would find like a corner where no one was sitting, so we could feel like there was just space in between us and everyone else, because they were coming from all throughout the United States. So that was really interesting, and stressful, but it was fun.
Okay, and now to close, I'll ask you some final questions. So are you satisfied with the local response to COVID-19 in, well, I know you're from Mission, but you also work in Edinburg and
Yeah.
Hidalgo County?
I think Hidalgo County did the best that they could, and I really appreciate what, as the CDC was loosening restrictions on the state, they were still very adamant that we needed to, mask up when we needed to, or if we were not vaccinated. I think the city of Edinburg has done a fantastic job as well. We are essentially still we're out of the mask mandate, and you'll still see signs driving into Edinburg and saying mask up. And they have like, I think that's really cool. I think Edinburg, out of all the cities that I was generally traveling through during the pandemic, has gone above and beyond to remind its citizens, hey, we're in a pandemic, wear a mask. um, as for Mission, I do feel like the restrictions were never really taken seriously, and that was something that, as someone who lives there, I wasn't exactly proud of what they were doing. And I do wish they would have taken it a little bit more seriously, and uh, gone down a little bit harder on businesses that weren't taking that seriously as well. Um, so it's easy to say that I'm happy that Grind is in a city that is taking care of its uh, its citizens.
Okay, and are you satisfied with the state response to COVID-19 led by Texas and Governor Greg Abbott?
No, absolutely not. Um, I think a lot of the decisions that the governor made, it was specifically done for business. It was done for self preservation, and it was done in a very political sense. It wasn't actually to help the masses. I know there's a lot of businesses that worried about, where they were going to get money from and how they were going to stay open if no one was about to go out. Um, but with creative thinking, I think a lot of the businesses that have been able to endure uh, the pandemic have seen success, at the end of it, because they took care of the people that were part of the community.
And
give me 1 second. Sorry. No. Yeah.
okay,
Sorry.
and you're good. Were you satisfied with the previous national response to COVID-19 led by former President Donald Trump and his administration?
No. That one's hard to answer without getting political. I mean, everything that I've answered is unfortunately sometimes science isn't really um, you know driving a lot of these issues. As someone who works in an industry where science has a lot to do with everything that we accomplish in a very scientific way, just the way the pandemic was handled by the previous administration was something that was scientific data or theory. It was just kind of like, y'all do what you want to do, and I'm just gonna like let y'all do it. And I think it created a really heavy divide. Um, I think there's certain things where you have to kind of trust science, right? Like it's easy for us to agree that we need oxygen to survive. And I think in that very scientific form, you can agree that there were practices that were saving lives. So, yeah.
Okay, and are you satisfied with the current national response to COVID-19 led by President Joe Biden and his administration?
So, I think Joe Biden or the administration was able to go ahead and kind of just pick up the pieces. So anything compared to what we were experiencing is better than what we were experiencing, right? I do think the vaccine rollout wouldn't have been as fast if the previous because the previous administration was relying heavily on that. So you have to kind of give credit where credit is due in that situation. I do believe that this current administration is doing its job in trying to get everyone vaccinated, and taking things slow and not from one day to the next saying, all right, everything's back to normal. So I do give credit to the administration to still holding the reins a little bit and not just letting everything fall apart and like, okay, you can do whatever, we're not in a pandemic anymore. So I don't know if that answers the question. I'm like in between on that one.
Okay.
I think that there's more that could have been done, but ultimately the states have a lot to do with that situation as well.
Okay, and if you had the power to respond to COVID-19 with laws, policies, or workplace decisions, what would you do differently, if anything?
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, so if you had the power to respond to COVID-19 with policies, laws, or workplace decisions, what would you do differently, if anything?
I think the mask mandate would probably be something that I would be a little bit more strict in. It's really hard because I think everyone has free will and everyone has to be kind of in a, everyone has free will. So it's really hard to say, okay, everyone's going to wear a mask, it doesn't matter. So it's definitely about education. I think if we educate properly, people can make educated decisions. I think the education of the pandemic was not accessible to everyone. Even now with the vaccinations, there's a lot of people in this region who are against the vaccine because they believe that women won't be able to get pregnant after it. So those are things like having resources that give that proper education, not just pharmacists, not just doctors, but even if there was some sort of like grassroots campaign that was able to give the actual like legit information to different communities, so there wouldn't be such a so it wouldn't have turned so political, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Okay, and last question for today. Are there any other stories or experiences you would like to share with me that I have not asked about?
Um, Not that I know of. Not that, yeah, I don't have anything that comes straight to mind. Um, I'll probably have one later and then I'll be like, man, I should have said something. But no, yeah.
Okay. Well, then that concludes our interview. Thank you so much for your time and for participating in this.
Thank you. Thank you for reaching out and yeah, thank you so much.